Okay.
This is WLUW Chicago 88.7 FM, and we have with us at WLUW Don Paul, an artist, jazz artist, and his whose recent album is Louisiana Stories. Welcome, Don Paul.
Welcome. Thank you for the welcome. Thank you for the invitation. Good to be with you.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much. You are such a versatile artist. So you're a storyteller, and then you have spoken word, and then you're also quite the jazz artist. So which came first, the spoken word?
Oh, I began as a writer when age 15. I aspired then to be a novelist and wrote four novels and then began to turn to poetry in the 1970s. This was 1965 when I was 15 and in public school, and writing helped me get through public school. So about mid 70s, after attending Stanford on a creative writing fellowship, I was doing blue collar work as a logger, a roughneck, and so forth. And I found that the work was poetic in that it had a lot of rhythm to it, and that led me more into poetry during that decade. And published several books in the 1980s. Then my brother Kenton, who's an excellent guitarist and natural musician, joined me in San Francisco in 1988, and we began to put poems to music. And my daughter Paloma had just been born, and one night when I was trying to put her to sleep, the first song that I wrote came to me, "A Baby's Smile is Sweet to See." So that was the progression. And once I got into a recording studio in 1988 with Kenton and Babatunde Lay and James Schaefer on drums and John Baker on keyboards, I was in another world. I was reborn. It was so exhilarating. So over the next 7 years, I think I produced or led 16 albums there in the Bay Area, and I was led into the very thriving creative music scene. Glenn Spearman, Lyle Ellis, Paul Plumley, India Cook were artists whom I produced. And then there were many others such as Larry Oakes, Donald Robinson, and it's hard to remember them all. But it was a wonderfully vibrant scene, and I was lucky to be part of it there in the middle 1990s.
When did you start connecting with the musician? Let's say the first time that you performed with the musicians, what did that feel like, and what was the occasion?
Very good question. That would be in studio with Babatunde Kenton and James Schaefer when we did tracks such as Detroit Breakdown. But the first live, like doing it in front of an audience with no net, so to speak,
Mhm.
it's always exhilarating and it's always a discovery. You never know what's going to happen, and that's how it should be, even when you're doing rehearsed material. Uh, my ideal is that when you perform, you know what you're doing, but you don't know how it's going to come out, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
Yeah, you have a structure for songs and poems, more or less, but there's a lot of room for improvisation.
And where was the venue? Do you still remember?
Uh, I would have to, maybe Commotion, which was a collective in San Francisco at the time, kind of punk rock like collective, world music collective. That might have been it. A very good band at that time, Suspect Many with John Baker, the wonderful guitarist Gianni Dharma Mas, George Cramachi, John Law was most frequently our drummer. John Carr was another great guitarist. Steve Fundy, a great guitarist. Richard Howell, with whom I'm going to perform in San Francisco this coming Friday, was a saxophonist. Mike Rose, trumpet player. Yeah, it was all, I can barely describe how invigorating and nourishing it was to be within music.
We have always seen you with jazz, but at that time, the venue had punk rockers. Did you ever perform with the punk rockers?
Gotta go, go, the way you feel. Yeah, I did. I love punk rock myself. I loved the Sex Pistols and the Clash in particular, and I love the whole spirit of it. Yeah.
Well, now you're in Louisiana in Mardi Gras town. How
Yeah.
did you move from the Bay Area to Louisiana and then also New Orleans and then you were in Rogers Park as for a time as well. So what were you doing in Rogers Park?
Oh, Rogers Park. Yeah, that will to take the questions in sequence. I got to know Louisiana and New Orleans from 1977 to 1980. I came here to work to get to know the South. Part of my uh, project to become a bigger, better writer of the Americas. So, and I felt you learn most by working in a place. So I wound up in Morgan City and soon became a roughneck offshore. And uh, roughnecking became my blue collar job. I would work either as a logger or as a roughneck to have funds to take time to write. So I got to know more of Louisiana. One of the tracks on our current album, Louisiana Stories, is a tribute to my first driller, Jack Groves from Lake Charles, Louisiana, who came up in Depression times. Yeah, and then in 79, 80, I got to know a really marvelous woman in New Orleans, Marie Cordier, known as Marcia. And there's another track on the album that's a tribute to her, Marcia's. Um, and then I came again, and I haven't left since 2006 to work with Common Ground on recovering enough of New Orleans for Black working class people that they could return. And we worked mostly in the upper and lower ninth wards. So that's what brought me back. And then I married Maurice in 2014 after we knew each other for a couple of years. So that's even more reason to stay.
And
Yeah.
then yeah, let's just discuss a little bit about New Orleans before we move to Rogers Park. So Jack Groves is so that was a real person, or was it like a
Oh, it was a real
amalgamation of
person.
different
You're
characters?
talking about Marsh's Sticky Warm March Friday in New Orleans near supper time evening, got kids wheeling and chasing in their tennies along the slant sidewalk. Well, that's a very real scene from March of 1980. Yeah,
Mhm.
she's a very real person. Yeah.
Mhm. And Jack Groves, the two tracks, they were so vivid in the imagery. I guess
Yeah.
those the people and the really affected you, and then you know it's you
Very, very lucky. We should maybe stop to acknowledge how great this current band is of Rivers Answer Moons.
Mhm.
Uh, Roger Lewis on saxophones, Kirk Joseph on sousaphone, Don Vappy on banjo and guitars, Herman LeBeau on drum set and soundscapes, and Alexi Marti on congas and cajon. So this band, I think, is tremendous, as an old hook tender used to say about different things. I also think, frankly, it's one of the greatest bands working right now. So glad and blessed to have them as my co-creators.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So why settle on the name of Rivers Answer Moon? It's
good question
beautiful.
again. It comes from a poem that I wrote in Venezuela in 2006. We, Common Ground, sent a delegation to Venezuela to try to persuade the Chavez administration to give us $500,000 for agriculture in the lower ninth ward. That didn't quite happen due to some internal sabotage. But one morning there, I wrote this poem, because the river answers to the moon and gathers silt from all its streams, sky and river never choose who touches them and whom they touch. Goes on to talk about how second lines are so magical in New Orleans and so forth. But those first 8 lines are the ones that pertain to the name Rivers Answer Moons. And of course, it's meant to convey that, everything affects everything else in the natural world. And nature has no prejudice,
Mhm.
who touches them and whom they touch. Mhm.
For
Yeah.
Jack Groves, I see that there's a hint of your taking a stand against racism. There is that tinge there.
Yeah, that is a main theme through the album, and I think maybe that's why the album is especially important now, because there's no question that the powers that be, as represented in the current presidency, want to pit us against each other, races against each other. So what I learned in Louisiana in 1977, while working in the oil field, is it goes away with work. One line in Colors Changing Color is men of crossed races call each other sugar and babe. So with Jack, the particular story is we were just riding home, I think, from our hitch offshore, coming from Grand Isle, Louisiana, and he was going to drop me off from Morgan City. And he told me the story of being offshore among other drillers and tool pushers where they smoke cigarettes and tell lies. And the talk got on to, would you let your son marry a black? They said another word for black woman.
Mhm.
And I said, well, I married the wife I wanted, so I guess my son could marry the wife he wanted. After that, men I thought were my friends acted like I was black too. Jack Groves, like Wayne Newton, Jimmy Rogers and his Blue Yodel, and Booker White, that old boy. That boy was in prison. That Booker White could play some blues you believed. So, among the lessons I learned in Louisiana. Heavy, huh?
It's when you write a song, uh, is there usually do you intentionally put political commentary in?
Um, well, no, but it always is there.
Mm.
I mean, I'm not writing a message song or a message poem, but it comes from how I feel and see. So I tend uh, to view, here's the truth. I'm always for the worker. Whoever the worker is, you can't go wrong with supporting those who do the work. And from that perspective, I think you inevitably become, quote, political, unquote.
Were you ever active in the unions?
Yeah, yeah. Uh, in the woods, there's the International Woodworkers of the World, I believe it is. It's the same acronym as the Wobblies, the International Workers of the World. So we struck at least twice. We were in the largest logging camp in the world at Thorn Bay, and they treated us relatively well, but not well enough, really. When I worked with the Jippo outfit, the hours and the pay and everything else was really hard. It was really 19th century. But anyway, it was still not what it should be. So we struck twice with the International Woodworkers of the World. And I'm trying to remember. I guess you could, yeah. We formed an association of road racing athletes in the 1980s, ARA, and that broke ground in that it defied the existing powers in road running and track and field to award prize money openly to athletes. And that for a while got us banned from international competition, but it all went away because we had so much support from the general public. Yeah.
You got banned because you were giving cash prizes? Is that what you said?
Because for a long, long time, decades, the Amateur Athletic Union, and then in the United States, was it TAC, the Athletics Congress, were means by which officials dictated where and when athletes could compete and always took a cut of whatever uh, pay was slid under the table to athletes.
Mhm.
Everything was supposed to be amateur according to the Olympic ideal and so forth, but lots of money was being made and it was all secretive. So what we wanted to do with the ARA was make it all open, you know, whoever was the best runner on that day got the prize money that he or she earned, rather than somebody getting favors under the table and another person, an athletics body, determining whether you could even compete.
And this runners, is it like physical running or is it driving or
Oh,
is it
no, it was road
logs?
running, like the big marathon in Chicago, of
Oh,
which I have lots of fond memories.
mm,
Uh, the one that Kerry Pinkowski, I think, still administers. But yeah, it was most marathon running or Cascade Runoff was a 15K in Portland, and there was a Lilac 12K in Spokane, and so forth. And those dozen or so major races made up the ARA circuit.
mm.
Uh, Once we had won in 1982 and we were able to carry out open prize money racing.
Did you ever write a song about this experience, about this Ara incident?
No, I wasn't writing songs then. One thing, I didn't begin to write songs until 1988. And I haven't really written anything about running itself. And running is a very lyrical experience often. So you've just planted a seed. Yeah.
So in 1988, you started writing songs. What inspired you?
Trying to put my daughter to sleep. I was
That
walking.
was it. Ah,
Yeah, I was
mhm.
walking around as she was 3 months old and she didn't want to go to sleep. So somehow this a baby's smile is sweet to see. Baby's smile is never evil. Baby kicks like a flower on the sea. She knows not the world's danger or misery. Dun, 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 dun. Go to sleep, Paloma. Go to sleep, Paloma.
And
That's
then
how.
and then she fell asleep. Did she?
Yes, she did. Victory. So I was hooked. I was going to write more songs.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move to Righteous Park. What you were so busy in those other areas, so you moved to Righteous Park. Was there some
No,
opportunity?
no, that's a good story. Thank you for bringing it up. No, I was invited to be the poet with the Rainbow Family. Diamond Dave, early friend of Bob Dylan, he and George and Teresa of Organic Family Farms invited me to be a poet at their gathering, which was held up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So I was there for several days, and then an old friend from another athletics organization, Athletes United for Peace, Michael James, whom I'm sure you know well, uh, he then had the Heartland Cafe, and he set up a reading for me. So I came down that July, and I remember that as if it were yesterday because it was so hot. I remember a sign along the interstate reading 119 degrees, you know. So I was hanging out before the reading by Lake Michigan there, and I saw all the wonderful murals and
Mhm.
all the communal activity, and it really, really struck me. And is the recollection of it in a 2002 book called 9/11 Facing Our Fascist State. This was the true America, the real melting pot, mixed bag America. It was it's pages, I don't have the book at hand, but it's around pages 120 in the eventual gathering of 9/11 Facing Our Fascist State into a 2008 book called The World is Turning. That's my remembrance of Rogers Park. I'd already been really fond of Chicago, but this part of Chicago seemed to me benign, really benign.
Well, that mural that you were talking about is Artist of the Wall in the Loyola Park. Every
Yep.
year they whitewash it and then start all over again. People buy by squares for about $100 each and paint it over.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Wow. So it's like Mardi Gras Indian suits or like other native customs where you throw away the past year and then create a new.
mhm. And it started from what I heard is there was gang graffiti along that wall. So in order to get rid of it, they came up with this idea so that the artists will draw on squares and then along a theme. Every year there's a different theme.
Wow. Yeah. How are you doing in Rogers Park now?
It's pretty the Artist of the Wall is coming up again. It usually comes up in uh early on Father's Day weekend, and that's
Wow.
where they do it.
Yeah, you and Bill do a ton there. I'm always glad to see the news of what's going on with you and your colleagues there.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Well, let's talk about talk more about Louisiana stories. Uh so everything over there that all the tracks are based on stories from Louisiana.
Right. It's an effort to encompass what I know of the state, which is the south of the state, from Acadiana into New Orleans, and to present it as a stage show. The tracks are sequenced as if you would see them on a stage. Louisiana Days, Louisiana Nights carries into the bands are bringing everyone home, into marshes, into Jack Groves, into Something You've Got. My Mother's Spirit Speaks to Me carries into the Dreamers and the Believers, carries into Some Rain Tonight, and then Colors Changing Color, and then Get Your Jam On, which is not specifically New Orleans, but is all New Orleans in terms of the musicians and so forth. It's a tribute to Jam Bar, the new artisan organic energy bar started by a friend of mine, Jennifer Maxwell. And then we conclude with the album, in the album, uh, with two tracks that refer back to the opening two tracks. And these closing two tracks are Our Trains Keep a Comin' and Every Child is Born to Be the Light of Dawn. And these last two we recorded as we did Colors Changing Color over in the Dockside studio, a great, great studio in Acadiana, Maurice, Louisiana, with guests Louis Michaud and Andre Michaud, Louis on violin and Andre on accordion. And all these tracks were purely improvised, purely first take. They had a structure that had been worked out by the band before, but it all happened in the moment. I remember Louis saying after we took Our Trains Keep a Coming and Every Child is Born to Be the Light of Dawn, magic, dang, magic. Yeah.
So the vocals side is all new material. I see that like Get Your Jam On is different from another version of Get Your Jam On, and
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, we added it's funkier,
Mm.
if that was possible. Yeah, it got funkier with Don on banjo and Alexi on percussion. Yeah, yeah.
And what about the instrumental side?
Oh yeah.
You had that too.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it's a two CD album, Louisiana Stories. And one disc is 10 tracks of instrumentals, and I love them. You know, I could enjoy them like listening to Birth of the Cool or Kind of Blue or Out to Lunch. The musicianship is so great, I think, among the players that they really stand on their own as music. Yeah.
So when you are right now, are you concentrating more on music, or are you still concentrating on storytelling and poetry?
Well, music and poetry, of course, would go together. I just wrote a poem this month, California Make Magic Go, because I'm going back to California on Thursday morning for a week to visit my daughter and my brother Kenton, as it happens, and his wife Elsbiata lost their house in Altadena.
Oh,
So I'm going to try to perform every night of the tour. And with Richard Howell in Northern California as a benefit for Rhythms of the Village, which was a store that kind of centered the community in Altadena. And it was started by Felicutes, former bass player. And I got to know him just by happenstance going to the post office there on Lake Street in Altadena. The son's name is Emeke, and he makes beautiful clothing. So anyway, uh, where were we?
going to California and
What am I doing now? Right.
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. So poems and songs for the band. I hope that we can do another album within the next few months, and I would call that album More Love Than Work, because the several tracks that we've cut here since 2020, a lot of which you played on Wizard or WLU, the most inspired of them have arisen from love. The track we did in tribute to Kid Jordan, Maybe You See Horses, and the track that's about Roger Lewis's son, Bobe, who passed away due to a rare form of bone disease. Um, Bobe, What a Spirit Walks That Way. Those are so alive, I think, because all of us felt the subject so much. So this next album, I think, by Deep Ram, Don Paul and Rivers Answer Moons, will be titled More Love Than Work.
It seems that you respect work so much. It's work and love is kind of intermingled with you. You respect work.
That's true too. But musicians refer to gigs as jobs and so forth. And um, the essence, what that is meant to convey is that the enjoyment exceeds any exertion.
Mhm. And when you're in New Orleans, this is such a fun and deep album. Do you tour in Louisiana as well?
We hope to. I would like nothing more than to perform at country fairs across Louisiana. And the original inspiration way back in 2023 was to bring Louisiana Stories to at least 5 theaters in cities of Louisiana. And that's still an objective for 2025. So we don't have shows now. We've got applications in with the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Theater and the New Orleans Jazz Museum and the Ellis Marcellus Center. And there's a place in St. Bernard Parish. We don't have offers yet. And I have performed with this band, these musicians. They're very, very generous and they will perform for much less than they're worth. But I'm kind of insisting that they be paid according to their worth for us to play.
Good luck with that. They deserve it. You deserve it.
Yeah.
What's so you are working more love than work. You are working at that already, or
No, we don't have
the
any
concept right now?
gigs. We don't have any gigs, but I
Mhm.
hope to have soon.
Mhm.
I'm going to get a lot more intent on that this week before traveling to California because everyone really wants to play.
Mhm.
We very much enjoy performance together. So I hope that, oh, we did one last June at the Marigny Opera House, and that was a lot of fun. And you can catch that on the website for Sticking Up for Children. Uh, DPRAM, Don Paul and Rivers Answer Moons, is united with Sticking Up for Children. Sticking Up for Children is the nonprofit that my wife, Maurice Philippe Dejean, and I have that works with 3 schools and an orphanage in Haiti. And if DPRAM takes off, as I hope it will, it can be a source of funding those preschools and orphanage.
Good luck with that. Yes. And so when you're performing, do you uh, in Louisiana, is it more concentrated in New Orleans or all around? Because what is I know that there's a very vibrant jazz scene in New Orleans, right? And then how do you navigate the jazz scene over there? And are there many musicians like you that does this spoken word? It seems as if you're very unique.
I don't think there's that much spoken word with improvisational music that
Mm.
I know of here. There's a lot of spoken word. We were fortunate enough to land in the middle of that about 12 years ago. We had a series of poetry balls at Cafe Istanbul. But I don't think, well, here's what Roger Lewis says. I often refer to Roger because he's such a cogent person. Nobody around here is doing what we're doing, you know. And he says about the band that no one here is playing kind of music we're playing. And it's because it is very deliberately based in structures and heritage, but also meant to offer complete freedom and expression in those things. So I think one of
What
the reasons that musicians like to work with me, I will hazard to say, is that they can express themselves as they want.
So you said that your songs are based on heritage and structures. What kind of heritage? What kind of structures?
Oh, I don't know enough to say. But
Yes, you're
I
not
will
rap.
say this, when Don, Kirk, Roger, Herman, and Alexei talk, we talked about this after, and I encourage your listeners to go to, I have a Substack called Stands a Human Being, and on it is a video recording after the six musicians and I did Colors Changing Color, and the engineer, great engineer, Justin Tockett over there at Dockside. And we talked about what just happened with Colors Changing Color, which was this improvised 14-minute long track that just, as Justin said, I was just levitating as things just kept building and building. And Louis said, it got so I couldn't tell what I was playing or what other people were playing. It was a very unified inspiration. Um, so again, where were we?
The structure and the
Yeah, well, that piece had structure, and it was evolved mainly by Don Bappy in terms of a line, and then Alexi on congas just kept, as Kirk said, just kept us on the groove throughout that whole 14 minutes. So it was with that kind of bass, and Kirk kept the bottom down too. Roger said that he sometimes was just following Kirk's bass line with the sousaphone. Anyway, that's one instance of kind of having structure at the outset and then going out on it. The same is true of marshes. There's an initial rhythm there that was found by Kirk tapping on his sousaphone. And that's the rhythm of Sticky Warm, March Friday in New Orleans near suppertime evening. And then as the story progresses, as the character depiction progresses, there lots of ways up and out from that. And Roger, in particular, on saxophone, you know, you kind of finish a passage, and then musicians are given the space to express how they feel about the language. And it's wide open altogether. But that said, each piece has a structure, and the songs in particular have kind of an exacting structure, like Some Rain Tonight, that took a lot of time to nail that in terms of the A, B, C, D, E parts.
and I think you also mentioned you incorporate the heritage into these works as well. I think the question was, what kind of heritage did you incorporate into these
Well,
groups?
that's another really astute question because it leads into why I wanted to do Louisiana Stories, because there is so many uh, cultures. There are so many cultures represented here, and there is such a mixed plenitude of heritage, and it all comes together in the musics, the variety of the musics that are distinct, but also owe to one another. You know, Zydeco is what's called Cajun, is what called, and it all comes through the immigrants. God bless them, the immigrants who made this state happen. Haitians in particular, and if we talk about the rhythmic roots of Louisiana music, it's African mostly. Everything gets mixed up so that there's a line and the bands are bringing everyone home. Drums on the square, Congo square, quadrilles from the French, bounce, which is kind of a mix of that's recent, and the strut is in the Palm Cafe strut. Uh, so that's just some of the heritage that's present here to be represented.
What about Native American?
We haven't done that right, but another good question. And uh, when I broke my hip last year, I had a physical therapist named Dion Lorette, who is uh, native, and he has many of those values. And he's also a flautist who plays with Greyhawk Perkins. So I would love to have more of that in our next batch of tracks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well done, Paul. Thank you so much for joining us. And if our listeners want to learn more about you and your music and Louisiana stories, where should they go?
There are two websites, Sticking Up for Children, uh, and the tab there is partners over 10 years, and that will take you to about 6 pages related to Don Paul and Rivers Answer Moons and Louisiana Stories. And also, many more pages are up on my Substack, which is called Stands the Human Being. And there must be 15 pages there now, and I'm doing podcasts, and I'm sure you found this, and it's very, very gratifying. We put up, I don't know, 10 podcasts since the day after Christmas, and they have over 600 downloads. And it's really good to see that people you don't know somewhere around the world are taking the trouble to download your music, 40 minutes of music sometimes in the podcasts, and put it in their libraries. I think that's a wonder of the internet.
Well, send us all those links too, and then we'll include them in the link for this interview when
Okay.
it's published.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Thank you, you and Bill, for all your work and what you bring to the people listening to The Wizard and WLU. I mean, that was when we began to do this with Kate Smith in 2020, getting to know you and Dave at Wadu and Ron at his jazz gallery. And again, Joe at the Neon Jazz, but many, many, many people and radio stations. This community radio is definitely one of the best things in the United States and around the world. Yeah.
It's always very comforting to hear your tracks on the radio, and because your tracks are, for me, they're very calming, and it makes me think too.
Good. That's the motto of the band. Did you know that?
Really?
Deep
What's the
Ram
motto?
motto, the motto is poetry and music for music and dancing.
Oh, okay.
Poetry and music for music and dancing.
Beautiful. Okay.
Uh,
Thank you so much, Dan Paul.
Thank you. Thank you, Trudy. All right. Bye-bye.